Hello and welcome everybody to our sphere painting course. We're painting this sphere in Grisaille, which just means painting black and white. If you missed us yesterday, you can still see that video and under the live section of the School of Atelier Arts page on YouTube. And please make sure to like and comment on this video, and make sure also to describe the channel. That would be good too. But subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss out on any more free classes. I also encourage all of you to join our mailing list. If you go to schoolofatelierarts.com, you can join our mailing list there. And we give out amazing things through our mailing list. You get special little blog posts and comments and special little tips and insights. So our newsletter is wildly popular, and I encourage you to join us in that community as well. Okay, so today, forgive me, I'm still fighting this cold. Today, we're going to be working primarily on the background of our sphere. Now, a lot of people think of a background as an afterthought, right? Oh, it's a background. Oh, okay, like blah, 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 throw it in, right? You hear that phrase a lot, throw it in. But that's not at all the attitude you want if you are going to be a classically trained painter. What you want to understand is that a background is a really, really important part of the environment of the sphere. And so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you how to set up your painting palette. I'm going to show you how to think about the background to make sure that it's a believable environment for your sphere, and show you some, painting tips and tricks along the way. So wherever you are joining us from, please say hello in the chat. I'm still new to this whole live streaming thing. It's nice to know that there's somebody out there. And let me know where you're from and say hello. Yesterday we had people from all over the world checking in and participating with us. So it's always lovely to see all of you. And maybe I should look at the comments so that I can see them when they come in. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Frankie, for being my first commentator this morning. It's such a relief to know that I'm doing this right. And hello, Ellen. Welcome from Pennsylvania. It's nice and chilly in Pennsylvania, I imagine, right now. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and I'm excited to get to it. So forgive me. Okay, so just like yesterday, there's a lot of thinking we want to do before we even make a mark on our page. Oh, and welcome, Peter from New Jersey. Yes. So yesterday, I was like yapping at you for at least a half hour before we even put a mark on our canvas. And today's going to be a little bit similar. Welcome, Leola from Maryland. So we are going to spend some time talking about paint and pigment and why we're choosing the colors that we're choosing. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Grisaille is and why Atelier trained artists paint in Grisaille, especially in the early stages of their training. And we are going to talk about the actual technique of laying down a background. So as I mentioned, we're going to be painting the sphere en grisaille, which just means in black and white, right? It's a French phrase that we inherited from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And it's interesting because Americans at the turn of the last century were often sent to Paris to train, and then they would come back and open up schools in the States. And that's why we have this kind of French language integrated into atelier training, atelier being the French word for studio, right? So just briefly, I know some of us are familiar with atelier training and some of us are not, but I have a whole video on the YouTube channel, on the School of Atelier Arts YouTube channel, called What is an Atelier? So if you want to really deep dive into what is an atelier, that's there for you. But briefly speaking, atelier training is just a type of training that has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, where artists pass down from one artist to another the collected body of information that they have about painting realistically. And it's kind of like a music conservatory for classical music. It's just that, oddly enough, today, most people don't realize that classical painting still exists and that you can still learn it. Da Vinci didn't wake up painting the Mona Lisa one day. He actually trained in an atelier for 10 years. In fact, his teacher had to eventually kick him out because he wouldn't leave the atelier. So if you want to paint like Da Vinci, if that's a dream in your heart, and it's okay, you don't have to say it out loud yet if you're not ready, but it's a dream that I harbored in my heart for many years before I found Atelier training. What you need to do is get Atelier training. If you want to paint like, the old masters that you see in the museums, you need the training that the old masters had, and that's what Atelier training gives you. That's a little bit briefly about Atelier training. Now, in an atelier, different ateliers run things differently, but it's common that before painting in full color, students will learn to paint in black and white, painting en grisaille. And the reason for that is that painting is harder than drawing, in part because most of us have been holding a pencil since we were young and we know how to manipulate a pencil. And certainly when you learn how to draw, you learn how to manipulate it at a more refined level, but most of us have experience with a pencil. However, for many of us, and myself included, I didn't have hardly any oil painting experience before I started Atelier training. And if you don't have any oil painting experience, please don't let it deter you from getting Atelier training. If you want to paint like the old masters, Atelier training is what you need. There's like a lot of fear around oil painting. Like, is it safe? Is it okay? And like, please don't let that anxiety and that fear stop you if painting realistically is what you really want. And if you really want to learn how to paint, obviously we have this great resource, these free classes that I'm streaming this week and possibly next week as well. But I also run an online atelier where you get to meet with me and I give you feedback on your art multiple times a week. And this helps you actually apply the training, get feedback from somebody that has the training, that has a better trained eye than you. And you can learn more about that. It's called the Atelier. I spell it Ateliy, like Atelier Painting Bootcamp, and that's also available on the School of Atelier Arts website. Now, awesome for you all being here today because you're going to get some pretty serious Atelier training throughout this class. I just want you to be mindful that it's one thing to watch and to do. Those are really, really wonderful things to do for your training. But if you are serious about painting like an old master, you really need the feedback from somebody that has a better trained eye than you do. So I'm putting it out there. I try to give as much free content as I can. I want to support all the aspiring artists out there. But I also want you to consider taking yourself seriously and taking that next step because that's what you need, to level up. Okay, so back to the grisaille. So the other good thing about painting in grisaille is that you only need two colors, a black and a white. Now, some of you may have seen some of my videos or some of the blog posts from School of Atelier Arts that black and white are not their own colors. And I want to briefly explain that here because it's important we understand why we're choosing black and white and what black and white can and cannot do. So black and white are not their own individual colors. If you think about it, it's not red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, white. That's not how the color wheel goes, right? So what are black and white? Black and white are actually reds, oranges, yellows, greens, blues, purples that are either really, really light, and we call that white, right? Or really, really dark, and we call that black. A great experiment to run is if you take a black marker and then spritz some water on it, and the black marker will start to run into red or blue or, whatever the colors are, in that marker because it's not actually black. It's a really, really dark value, red or blue or purple, etc. The same is true for white. Have you ever heard, an interior decorator, for example, be like, oh, I need a warm white. Oh, I need a cold white. Oh, what they're really saying is I want a really light value yellow, or I want a really light value blue, right? But we tend to use this word white because the lighter the pigment is, the lighter in value something goes, the more difficult it is to discern exactly what color it is, whether it's red or orange or purple or whatever. So has anybody ever wondered about like why black and white weren't on the color wheel before? Let me know in the chat. Like it's a real thing. I was so confused, and I was an art teacher. I'm a licensed art teacher before, and I taught for many years before I learned that black and white weren't actually colors, right? It's very confusing. There's a lot of bad information out there. And the great thing about Atelier training is that it's a very structured kind of training that has been refined over hundreds and hundreds of years to efficiently teach you how to draw and to paint. Oh, there's a good comment from Magritte here too. So not just black and whites, but browns, right? Like, why isn't brown on the color wheel? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, brown. And if you join our online atelier, we talk extensively about brown and how it's actually a neutralized orange. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole here because we're trying to work in just black and white, 2 colors, right? The other great thing about black and white is that if you're painting on a budget, or you don't have a lot of money to spend on starting your painting journey, 2 colors is a great way to really learn and to really make progress in your technique without an enormous investment. So, oh, and Peter's saying that he learned in physics class about light. Now, be careful because the way light works is different from the way pigment works. And you know more about that than I do in if you were taking physics classes. But a lot of reason that there's so much confusion about color is that we're getting a little information from people who work with light, like people, in the computer world, for example, and then different information from people who are working with pigments, and they behave differently. So that's another reason why there's more confusion there. So when I'm talking about color, I'm talking specifically and exclusively from the pigment standpoint of how color functions. But that's a great point. That's a whole nother reason why it gets so confusing. Excuse me. Okay, there's a great question in the chat about which black to use. So let's talk about that, because if we're painting en grisaille, we're painting in black and white, it matters which black and which white we use, because there's no such thing as black and white. They're just light and dark value colors. Now, if you use a really cold black, like an ivory black is the standard one that I keep in my on my palette. It's actually a really, really dark blue, right? And it's really cold. And when you paint with a really dark blue, and you're painting en grisaille, you start to feel a little depressed, I feel like, you're painting this cold landscape that I don't know. When I was in atelier training, I painted an entire year doing nothing but grisaille. And as I was painting in grisaille, my wardrobe turned grisaille. Like I couldn't wear color, and my world just got very bleak for a while, right? And one thing that helps is using a warm black instead of a cold black, in my opinion. This is just personal taste. You can use any black that you have already. It's fine. But if you are going to spend an entire year of your life, 8 hours a day painting in grisaille, then I suggest getting the warm black. Now, different pigments from different companies have different colors that they use for their black. So even an ivory black from one company might be more blue than an ivory black from a different company. I personally like using lamp black because it tends to be a consistently warmer kind of black than the ivory blacks. Now, ivory traditionally is made from boning burn. I don't know if that's how they still burning bone. I don't know if that's how they still make it, but that's why they call it ivory black. Lamp black was traditionally made from like the oil lamps. They would take the soot, from the wick of the oil lamps and make the lamp black. So those are the origin of those 2 different pigments. So I'm determined to get rid of this cold. It's been like weeks. I'm like, leave me alone, cold. So today I'm going to be using a lamp black and an ivory white. Now, we talked about the blacks. Let's talk about the whites. Sorry, I don't know if I just said ivory white, but I meant titanium white. Apologies. So titanium white does tend to be a cold white. It tends to be a light blue. Again, it varies by manufacturer, but most often it's a light blue. Now, you can use a lead white, which is a warmer white, but please be mindful of using lead. And I believe, is anybody here from today from the European Union? Because I believe that it's very difficult to get lead paint there. Now it's been banned. SAA is not responsible for any studio choices that you make. Please do your own studio safety research. We are not responsible for any studio choices you may make at home. So please be diligent and look it up. That being said, I personally like using lead white, but I don't teach with lead white because it's not accessible to all my students. So I will be using the titanium white today, so a cold white, and I'm going to be using my warmer black, my lamp black. So that's how I chose those two colors. That's why I chose those two colors. And that's what we're going to be using for this project. So if you have any additional questions about the pigments, please don't be shy. Talk to me in the chat. I love hearing from you. I see that other people have also been confused in the past um, about all this color information. Like, why is the color wheel weird, and where do the colors that have names go when it's not red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, right? And Ellen's saying, I didn't know there's a warm black. Now, keep in mind that every color is both warm and cool. So you can have a warm yellow or a cold yellow. It only depends what you compare it to. So if I compare a lemon to what's something warm, and I don't know why I'm blanking, my headband, okay. My headband is a much warmer yellow than the lemon yellow. So if I was talking about the lemon, I'd say, hand me the cold yellow. If I was talking about the color of my headband, I'd say, hand me the warm yellow, right? So every color is both warm and cool. I have a whole other video on the School of Atelier Arts YouTube channel just on warm and cool. If this is like blowing your mind, the first time I heard this, I was like, how is that true? Because everybody knows blue is a cold color and red is a warm color, or whatever it was, but that's not true. Every color is both warm and cool. And the same is true for blacks. Every black can be warm or cool. It just depends what you're comparing it to. So even though lamp black is a warmer black than ivory black, it's not exceptionally warm. It's just warmer than the other option I have in my paint box. So it's relative to what you're doing. So I don't want you to go get lamp black and be like, yes, it's going to be, this really chromatic dark red. That's not quite the extreme of it, right? It's just that it's warmer than the ivory black. Yes, it's definitely all relative. Okay, so there's a question about my headband. Is it yellow or ochre? Okay. Because we're not painting in color, I don't want to do like a total deep dive into color. I do have other videos that explain it, but the answer is that my headband is a medium value neutralized warm yellow. So if you want to learn more about why that's true, I encourage you to check out the other video, but I want to stay focused on black and white today. Okay. And yeah, sometimes, Ellen, just a little bit warmer pigment is all you need to, not feel depressed when you're painting in Grisaille. It's fun the first few paintings. It's just, if you're going to spend a lot of time doing it, it's worth having a little warmth in your life after painting in black and white. I often felt like I was in Wizard of Oz. And at the end of that year of painting on Grisaille, and I went to color, it felt like that moment in TV where things went to color. It was really like shocking, actually, after spending a year just in Grisaille. Yeah, I don't need depressive stuff either. Like, I really believe in joy. I want joy in life. I want the experience of painting to be joyful. Sometimes that means working through hard things. It's not easy. I don't know anybody who went through Atelier training that didn't cry in their car at least a few times, right? While they were training. But it's joyful to really push yourself mentally. And when you train in Atelier training, you're actually changing the way that your eyes see. And your optic nerve is actually an extension of your brain. Like, as opposed to any other art form, when you train your eye, you're like directly training your brain. And I mean, other art forms train your brain too in different ways, but they're not using the one organ in your head that is actually a piece of your brain, right? So it's really astonishing as you start the Atelier training, your eyes will literally start changing. You will see things in a different way. My hope for you by the end of this project, and by the time we're done streaming this and we have a Grisaille sphere here, is that you can see smaller increments of value change than you did before you started. And I can commit to that. You will absolutely be able to see smaller increments of value than what you can right now. Your eyes are going to be changed forever. Bold claim, I know, but it's true. Okay. And yes, we don't, because it's the winter time right now, we don't want to paint with a cold black pigment when we're already, shivering in our in our homes, especially with this cold front going through the States right now. It's a lot. Okay, let's get to the painting part, because I've been, once again, yapping for at least 20 minutes and we don't have any paint down yet. Okay, so this is the palette I'm going to use. Just a little bit of information for those who have never painted with me before. I really, really encourage you to always be organizing your palette. And my black pigment is a little oily and runny. Normally having oily, runny paint doesn't bother me, but when I am teaching, it's a problem because I'm always holding up my palette and I don't want that pigment dripping on me. So I'm just going to take a little paper towel and clear it off. Again, if you're new to painting with me, I love these automotive paper towels. They soak up oil much better than regular paper towels. They don't soak through to your hands. And one of the key studio safety rules that I emphasize in all my teaching, whether you're in my online painting boot camp or if you are in this live stream right now, is that the best thing you can do for your health to make sure that you don't get any of the pigments in your body where you don't want them is to keep your hands clean. If you ever get paint on your hands, I encourage you to immediately stop what you're doing and go wash. That's really annoying when you learn how to paint because you're kind of messy and sloppy and you're stopping every minute and interrupting your train of thought. But if you develop the habit of learning how to paint without getting paint on your hands, I think it's one of the most important studio safety things that you can do. Okay. Okay, so I have the black and white on my palette. I organize my palette from light values to dark values. However you organize your palette, I obviously think that you should do it this way because this is what works for me. But be consistent. You know, if you put your pigment in a different place every time you sit down to paint, it's using up brain power unnecessarily, right? If you can develop the motor skills to always know which pigment is in which place on your palette, it's going to save you a lot of like that processing power in your brain for actually solving the really hard stuff, which is painting, right? So I believe in systems. I teach so many systems in the online Atelier bootcamp because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to figure it out all on your own. You don't need to spend 6 months not painting while you're fighting how to set up a palette or whatever other problem you may be having. You know, I have students sometimes that come into the boot camp that are like, oh, Mandy, I just discovered this one thing. You know, I spent a year developing it or whatever. Now, and, you know, I look at them and I'm like, that's amazing. I'm glad you came to that discovery. But you know, if you train in an atelier sooner, then you can have that 6 months of your life back or that year of your life back. And I can teach it to you in 10 minutes. Like sometimes it's that kind of value that happens when you actually get, you know, serious atelier training from somebody who knows what they're doing. You know, with the proliferation and popularity of atelier training, which is wonderful. I love seeing so many great artists and really well-trained artists, you know, putting information out there. There's so many great YouTube channels out there. You know, I trained with Paul Ingridson for a little bit, and he has a fabulous, you know, channel that does a lot of talking. I encourage you to join that one as well. Um, but you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's so many things that you can learn under the guidance of an atelier trained instructor that will help you paint better and faster. And once you have that information, you will be a better painter the rest of your life. I'm always astonished when people are reluctant to invest in themselves. I think it's that they're afraid that they might not really be able to paint, but you can. It's an academic skill. Anybody can learn how to do this. It's just a matter of, can you put yourself out there to do it? Are you ready to invest in yourself to do it? You're all obviously investing in yourself right now with your time being here in this online class with me. So, you know, I can tell already that the people, you know, joining this live stream are serious about their training. And I want to encourage you to pay attention to, you know, the cost benefit analysis of, okay, you're here investing time. You want to learn this. How much do you want to learn this? What level of learning are you willing to commit to right now? Okay, little side rant. Okay, so we have the titanium white and the lamp black here. I'm going to mix something that's called a string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix maybe 3 values between my white and my black, just as kind of like a base idea of the spectrum of my colors. Now, if I want to mix the halfway color between this white and this black, I do not want to take equal amounts of paint and mix them. Why? Can anybody tell me why that isn't going to give me the visual halfway point? Does anybody know the answer? So I'll ask the question again. if I take equal amounts of this white and equal amounts of this black and mix them together, why is it that it won't come out as a visual halfway point between black and white? I'll give you guys a second to type. I really like asking these questions because when you are engaging in this way, when you're making a guess, even if it's a wrong guess, you are going to learn better. Keep in mind, my background is in pedagogy. I'm a licensed K-12 art teacher, as well as I train art teachers all over the country. And, what I want for you when you're watching this is to not be a passive observer. I want to make sure you're freaking learning. Okay. So I encourage you to participate as much as possible in the question and answer because it's going to enhance your learning opportunities with this time that you're already investing. Okay, and I'm getting some great answers here. So the pigments are different strengths, right? And it depends on which pigment. The titanium white is actually a lot stronger than, say, lead white is. So it depends what pigments that you have, but they all behave differently. So the important thing is to make a first guess. So I'm going to take a little bit of my white and some of my drippy black here. And I'm just going to mix it together and see what I got. And I'm going to ask myself, and this is the only question that matters when you're mixing paint, is what does it look like? Visually, what does it look like? Now, in the chat, please tell me, do you think that this color is visually the halfway point between this white and this black? Is this halfway, or is it too dark, or is it too light? So let me know in the chat. What do you think? Is it too light, too dark, or just right? Okay, I see a lot of really smart people in the chat. And absolutely, absolutely. So it is too light. This is not the visual halfway. If I had a value scale where my white is 1 and my black is 9, this color right here would maybe be a 3. And what I want it to be is a 5. So I'm going to darken it a little bit more. Okay. So looking at this, how do we feel about this color? Is this just right, a little bit too light, or a little bit too dark? And I'm going to wait for some answers because this is an important part of learning. Oh, I wish I could hear all your voices on these streams. Like I really, I like it when like everybody shouts out like, yeah, I know about pigment. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to make a guess. Okay, so some people are saying I can live with it. Some people are saying a little too light. Some people are saying maybe a little dark. And it's close. I could live with it. I would say that visually it's a tad light between the halfway. But it's these small increments of change. Like if you don't see that this is just a tad light, that's okay. Just having made a guess and me telling you, yes, it is a tad light, that's changing the way you see. This is the advantage of training with an Atelier trained person. This is the advantage of interacting with an Atelier trained person, is that your eye is actually going to get better and more nuanced the more that you participate in this, right? All right, so it's just a tad light. I would say it's a 4.5, and what I want to go for is a 5. So, this isn't a big change that I'm doing right now. And I do want to point out that because we're working with the constraints of video and online learning, that your screen may be slightly different from my screen, which may look slightly different than what I'm actually seeing on my palette here. So do be mindful that there's a little bit of differentiation that you are experiencing as an individual from every other individual in this live stream right now. All right, that wasn't a big change. That was a little change. It's still feeling a touch light to me. I'm going to add just a touch more. All right, but do you see how we're taking our time, right? We're not rushing into anything. We're doing things the right way. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about this as a halfway point. Now, I actually have a lot of surface area to cover, And if I only have this much paint, I'm going to start doing dumb stuff. I'm going to start, painting really thin. I'm going to try to like thin my paint with unnecessary additives. I'm going to like run out and just start using a different color instead because it's on my palette and I'm too lazy to start, stop what I'm thinking about and change. So one really key lesson, especially if you're new to Atelier training, is to make sure that you don't want giant piles of paint, but you want piles of paint that are proportionate to the surface that you want to cover. And if you do ever run out, you have to develop the discipline to stop what you're doing and remix the pile that you used up. All right. And I see other people in the chat being like, oh, I do that. That thing that you just said, Mandy, I do that. Right. So, it's okay. We're all learning, but you're here today because you want to learn. And people think, oh, painting realistically is about how you hold your brush, right? Or something like that. And it's not. It's all these little systems combined that will make you a great painter, right? Because when you have good systems, you're not using your energy figuring out where your paint is or how much paint you have. You have everything you need so that the only thing you have to think about is the visual problem in front of you, right? Oh, and this is a really great point as well. So Ellen's saying she's afraid that she won't mix up the exact same color twice too. Now that's a whole other issue. Now Grisaille is a lot more forgiving than working in full color when it comes to matching pigment again, but it is scary to run out of paint. And then we start getting our anxiety. We're like, can I mix the right color? It's going to be different. What have I done? I've ruined my painting. The next thing you know, you're throwing it across the room, right? Like you don't need any of that angst in your life. Be proactive by, mixing up enough. This may sound funny, but I think about it as I'm one of those people that in my bathroom, I like to have a bowl of toilet paper. I just like having the abundance of it. It makes me feel better. Like, I don't know why. I just like that feeling of abundance. And I feel the same way about my paint piles. I make my paint piles a little bigger than I think them because I'd rather have too much than not enough, right? I like the feeling of abundance. I don't want to feel like I'm running out while I'm thinking about painting. So a little TMI. All right, so I'm going to mix up a little bit more pigment. And I'm going to mix it over here separately because Ellen brought up that really great point. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to mix the same color twice. So I'll mix it completely separately here, and then we can talk about some techniques that we have for matching the same color twice. So I'm going to go ahead and make a first attempt. Oh, look at that, Mandy. That's a pretty good first attempt at matching that first color. Now it appears, and I don't know if you can tell from the video, but it's just a touch. Well, actually, you tell me. I'm not going to tell you. We're practicing your seeing, right? This pile on the bottom, is it lighter or darker than the pile on top? And I know some of you are sitting there being like, oh, I don't want to type on my keyboard or whatever, but you're missing out on learning opportunities when you don't participate in these questions because, in your brain, you may have an idea. At the very least, even if you don't want to type in the chat, get a pencil and paper and write it down because it commits you to something. Because I have found that when I just ask students to think about it and not commit to an answer, that like they do this weird switchy thing in their head. I don't know why, but when I make them actually write down an answer, then they learn better. They learn faster. So this is for your own good. Eat your vegetables. Give me answers. And even if you're not the kind of person that likes to type in the chat, at least get a piece of paper and write it down there because then you're committed to an answer. Okay. And great. It is a little darker. Ooh, and I like that. So some people in the chat on a scale of 1 to 9 are giving me a 6. I don't know if it's quite a 6. I would say it's more of like a 5.5, but I like your thinking. All right. Okay, so I'm going to lighten it just a little bit. All right. Now, I'm starting to get a fairly big pile of paint, which is what I wanted, right? I wanted a bigger pile of paint than I had, but this paint is still a little bit too dark. And I'm gonna have to start adding bigger and bigger amounts of white into it. And so then I'm gonna have an even bigger pile. And I don't want a giant pile. I don't want to be like glopping paint like this. So what I'm gonna do, this is my favorite trick. I don't know why it took me years to figure this out, but I hope that this saves you some heartache. I'm just gonna take half my pile and just stick it to the side, right? Because then I don't need so much white to lighten it. Oh, and now what have I done? I've gone a little bit too light. Just a touch too light. So I have two options. I can add a little bit of black, or I have this darker pile. I bet if I took a little bit of this lighter pile and put it aside and blended in my pile that was a little bit too dark, I could get much closer. And voila. All right. So you can match your paint colors. It's possible. You just need some techniques and a method on how to do it. So my method was make a best guess, evaluate. Does it need to be lighter or darker? Make an adjustment. When my pile got too big, I put some on the side. And now I have a bigger pile of paint that I can combine into one color. That was a fun little side quest. Okay. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to find a visual halfway point between my 5 and my white here. I'm starting with the bigger pile and I'm just putting it into my leftovers here because I find that that's a good way to just add a little bit of darkness without overshooting it. And that's feeling a touch light. Now, if I pull from my black, I'm in danger of over exaggerating. You know, actually, I don't think it is a touch light. I'm squinting my eyes. Squinting is your best friend. Actually, my first thought was that it was too light. But when I stand back and I squint my eyes, this feels too dark. This feels like it's hugging this color more than it's hugging that color. So I'm going to take a little bit, just throw it on the side and add a little bit more white. And I'm just going to lay it down because that's the best way to see. And it's still kind of hugging the side color. So I'm going to take a little bit, put it to the side, and take a little bit more white. I like to think of it as hugging because then it makes you feel like, oh, it's just a little bit closer to one side than the other. You know, just a different way to think about it. The more different ways you have for evaluating a value, a color, the more accurate you can get. That's still feeling really dark. I'm just off on this. Throw some on the side. You know, I don't often paint with lamp black, but it's certainly a lot more potent than other blacks I've worked with. How do I feel about that? It still feels like it's belonging to this family. I'm going to go really extreme and put almost all of it because I'm just making a mess. Like I'm just not seeing it well. So I'm going to take a whole lot and just shoot a little bit too light and see if by overshooting, I end up where I want it to be. But again, the advantage of having these piles on the side, you know, this is feeling closer. All right. People tend to skew their values too dark on the light half of the value scale. All right. That's a really, really common mistake. Okay. I'm not sure. Laura's asking a question. Is your palette a 4? I don't know what that means. This is just a random palette. I'm not particular about my palette. I like them small and I like to hold them when I paint. But other than that, I'm not too particular. And there's another great question. Doesn't the color of your palette reflect how you perceive color? That's partially true. So this palette has a warm undertone and it's a medium value and it can skew how you're seeing colors. That's absolutely true. But if you use the same palette, you'll get used to it in whatever way it skews your vision, and you'll figure out how to adjust for that. Um, and I see a message in the chat that I know your teacher tricks. Yes, I know all the teacher little tricks. uh, I do. Okay. I'm gonna also mix the halfway between our middle and our excuse me. And so I'm gonna start with one of these piles just to use it up, and I'm gonna add a little bit of dark to it. I don't know, maybe, I really struggled with that last value, but this one seems to be coming along. Let's put it in place in C2. Oh, it's definitely hugging the middle color more than the black. So I'm going to add a touch more black. Put it in C2. It's still feeling closer to this one than that one. I think I really overdid it here. I'm going to pull a little bit more of my light in. That's actually feeling okay as a halfway point. It could go a touch darker. All right, I'm going to call that good for my value steps. So I have my 1, this would be a value 3, 5, 7, and 9. So we have, ta-da, mixed up our palettes. I am debating because we are almost out of time for today. So I think that we're going to have to put off actually painting our background until tomorrow, because there's a lot of information I want to give you on that, and I don't want to rush through it. So basically, what I've done today is we talked a whole lot about what grisaille is. This is called a string. You could mix up all 9 colors if you want. Something I didn't mention when I was doing this is that in order to get accurate colors on a string, it is so, so, so helpful to start with the halfway color. All right. And then find the halfway between the halfways this way. All right. So whether you're doing a 9-step scale, a 5-step scale, find the halfway point first. Oh, I understand that Laura was saying, because she was like, is your palette a 4? She was talking about on the value scale. I thought that like 4 was like a style of palette or something. My apologies. I am not super knowledgeable about palettes. That is not my point of interest there. So the value 4 on, yeah, I think that's a reasonable statement that it is a value 4. Okay, so we are set up with all of our little piles for tomorrow. Now, some of you may be familiar with paint saving methods, and some of you may not. Typically, every day that I paint, I mix up a whole new palette. And I found that this helped train my eye faster because I was getting practice every single day mixing my colors. So even though it was really slow, I would do it every day. And I found that compared to some of my classmates, that my ability to mix my palette got really fast, that even though it was slower in the beginning, I was more efficient, for the rest of my career. Right. So it's worth investing in, practicing your systems. Now, that being said, I just mixed up all that good paint and I didn't even paint anything today. So I'm going to save my paint for tomorrow. There are a few different ways that you can save your paint. One is you can just leave it out for a day. It's not going to harden on you. Titanium white in particular is a very slow drying pigment. And all of those piles I mixed titanium white into, except for my lamp black. But my lamp black, did you see how runny it was and how oily it was? It's going to dry slower than my other black as well because of all that oil concentration in there. Now, if you don't like it when your paint even dries out a tiny little bit, which is normally who I am, you can also stick it in your freezer. That slows the drying process. And I've been told, but I haven't seen the scientific literature on this. So I will share a rumor with you and you can try it and see if it works for you. But I had classmates that would, put their paint on into a paint box, the kind that you can get from a craft store that has a glass bottom and a plastic lid. And they put their paint on there. And then on the side, they put a couple drops of clove oil. And supposedly that will make your paint last longer as well. Clove oil does smell amazing. So there's that benefit. One of my classmates mixed a tiny bit of clove oil into her paints, and those paints never, ever, ever dried. Right? So some people say, oh, add clove oil. But if you do and you want to try it, the tiniest, 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 tiniest bit will still extend the life of your paint by like months from what I experienced watching a friend do it in the atelier. But those are the methods I know of for saving your paint, and you can experiment and see which one works for you. Oh, this is a great one. So Ellen's saying that she puts clove oil drops on a little felt thing that she sticks on the lid, and that keeps the oil from going into the paint. Aha. So that's a great idea. I like that. Excellent. Okay. I am so happy that you guys were able to join me today. Now's the time if you have any additional questions about what we discussed. And tomorrow, I know I said that I was doing it today, but tomorrow we'll paint the background. Um, and Leola, thank you for participating. It is true. You need to eat the vegetables. If you're going to be here, you might as well extract as much knowledge and, eye-changing sight that you possibly can out of this class. And thank you, Ellen. I'm so glad that you learned a lot. And thank you, Frankie. I'm so glad that you're joining us and that you're finding that you appreciate these lessons. That's really encouraging to me. I'm telling you to do scary things like type in the chat, but doing this live stream is new for me and scary. Like I've been waking up every day being like, you can do it. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. Oh, so somebody's asking, what is the name of Paul Ingebrigtsen? I wonder if I can post a comment. I'm still learning, guys. Paul Ingebrigtsen. He has like a really prolific YouTube channel. I studied with him. He's an incredibly knowledgeable person, in particular about color and edges. I think those are especially his strengths. So I encourage you to check him out. Yeah. Oh, and please make sure to like and follow my channel to make sure you don't miss out on any of the random lessons that I throw up sporadically. And I do encourage you to join my mailing list. If you aren't already on my mailing list, you can find a link on the School of Atelier Arts website. Our mailing list is wildly popular, and I send out all my best goodies through the mailing list. So you won't want to miss it. Thank you, Ellen, for reminding me about the likes. Yes, thank you. You know what? We're all going to get through this together. You guys are going to learn a lot about art. I'm going to learn how to stream. It's going to be a group project. All right. Well, thank you all again for, investing in joining us today, but also investing in yourselves. It's a big deal when you take your art self seriously. So congratulations to you, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.